All right, so we got the alternator on the idler pulley, the upper tensioner. I totally forgot. I was like, there's one more pulley that goes on here. Well, it's a power steering pump. Well, the power steering pump we have has play in the input shaft on it, so I am not gonna throw it back on because it's just gonna leak. So we're gonna get a new one ordered. We got a new alternator. Pretty much everything on this motor is new. There's nothing really being reused. So yeah, we'll get one ordered, probably be here. I can do that once the motor's off the stand, but we're gonna take the motor off the stand right now, get it on the ground, well, maybe in the air. We're gonna put the flywheel on it, clutch, put the transmission on it, get it ready to throw in the car this week. That's kind of the idea. So let's get to it. Don't stop breathing heavy in the camera. Father like son.
Have I ever gotten you in any trouble?
You gotten me in any trouble?
Have I ever gotten you in any trouble?
A little bit, financially.
What?
All right, so I'm getting all the clutch and transmission stuff ready to go together, make sure everything's right spline, you know, pilot bearing, everything. We just got the rear main seal tidied up on this thing, and now it's time to put the flywheel on it, and then shortly after that, do this clutch on it. So here's the flywheel we got for this car. It's a lightweight aluminum flywheel, anodized blue. Never seen it blue before, but why not? So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get this guy thrown on real quick. I use blue Loctite on these. I don't think it's what's the word? Not recommended, but I don't think it's completely necessary. We'll go with that. But I like to. Makes me feel a little bit more secure about my flywheel not flying off this thing at 7,000 RPM. So, land it. I think there is one bigger hole. Yeah, there is. That hole is a little bit bigger, and it's for that dowel to go through. Like that. Let's just get one started in there. We'll grab the old. I just have to give it a little tap. Little tap. But you get the point. So we're gonna throw that on there, and we'll get the clutch on there, and stab the transmission on there right after that. So this is just a little. I think I don't know. I think on the automatics I use it as a spacer. I don't think it really has to do much with spacing on a manual, but it's this little dust cover. It goes between the transmission and back of the motor. So. Yeah, this is all crap video. Brushes at the bottom of the ring. It says flywheel side, everyone. So don't get at me in the comments saying to put the pressure plate in backwards. Because I didn't, Goomba. All right, eat some food, get back to working on this S50. We like eating on top of our workspace because you get a little bit of everything you're working on flavor-wise. Check that thing out, dude. Look at the cross-section on that. All right, so this is our ZF 5-speed out of the M3. It was completely soaked in motor oil because this thing had a battery remain sealed pan gasket. So pressure washed it and drained all the fluid. There's a few things we need to put on this before we throw it on the back of the motor, and then a few things we need to do before we put it in the car. So we're gonna start by getting inside this bell housing. We're gonna take the clutch fork off, which normally can be pretty simple with this clip once the car is done. So that's the clutch fork. So how this works is it pivots on this end and this end. This end gets pushed by the slave cylinder, and this is where the throwout bearing rides, and the throwout bearing pushes on the clutch fingers. So get into that a little bit more. We have a new slave cylinder to throw in here into the bell housing, and then we also have a new pivot ball. Because I'll show you something on this one. So that's the retainer spring that keeps the fork on, and then in here is a plastic pivot ball. I'll get it pulled out so we can have a better look at it, but they're plastic, so we're gonna be replacing with a brass one. When these get old, they'll shatter, and then you'll lose your fork in there, and your fork will start spinning at the same RPM as your flywheel, and I've had it happen. It tends to blow a big hole through the side of the transmission. So we're gonna take care of that right now, and then we'll get this transmission thrown on the motor so that this drivetrain is ready to get thrown back in. So this is our new slave cylinder. It's a FEBI OEM replacement from FCP Euro. If you guys are ever curious where we get 99% of the OEM parts for these BMWs, it's from FCP Euro. So I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but best place in my opinion to get aftermarket and OEM replacement stuff, so go ahead and go check them out. So we got a new slave cylinder, which is going to be replacing the factory one. The factory one was good, but I would hate to put this car back together, send it to Vonne, and then kind of the slave cylinder go out. So we are replacing the slave cylinder and the master cylinder in this car. So I'm going to yank that one out, change over the line to this one, and then we'll replace that pivot ball, get the fork back in it, get this thing mated up. All right, so the technical name for this thing is Performance Clutch Pin Grooved. This is a AGA. So this is the stock one. It is a little plastic, just dowel basically, with a rounded tip on the end. And like I said, that clutch fork pivots on it. So when these shatter and you lose that, then your clutch fork can spin wherever. So I don't know why BMW made them out of plastic. They like doing that. My theory is you break this 25-cent piece, it costs probably $800 to $1,000 in labor to pull your transmission, put a new one in. That's probably why they made it out of plastic. But luckily there's good enough companies out there that have figured out that that is an issue, and they now make a brass one, which I've put these in every one of my cars and I've never had an issue. And as you can see, it's identical. It's just a brass version instead of plastic. So we're gonna go ahead and throw this in. I like to might seem a little weird. Some people epoxy them in, some people don't. I still want to be able to get it out if it ever does need to be serviced. So I actually put just a little bit of red Loctite on it, which people are like, oh, Loctite's for threads. Well, it still hardens. So it's still a glue in a way, and you can use it. And these things fit in there super tight, so you shouldn't really need it, but just as an extra little precaution, I like to do it. So you just put a little bit on it, we'll put it back in the hole and tap it back in. That's a little trick. So if you can't get it in with just hitting it with a plastic mallet, put a 13mm socket, deep socket on a extension. It catches it on the shoulder, so you're not gonna mess up the end of it. Drive it in there and call it a day. This little spring actually goes in the groove of that pivoting point. So there's a groove on the stock one, there's a groove on these brass ones. So it holds itself in there like that. You can see the spring locates itself. So now we have a new pivot point on the slave cylinder and a new pivot point on the transmission itself. So we're gonna get this fork cleaned up. I'll show you how I grease these. Obviously you don't wanna put a bunch of grease, but to keep them from squeaking or being metal on metal, you just apply a little bit of grease in all these little dimples and on these two lobes. Just a dab, you don't need a whole lot. All right, so I just used some high temp disc brake grease, wheel bearing grease, just something on high temp because the clutch obviously is gonna get a little hot, and a Q-tip. When I said just a little dab, that's literally all I mean. So all you need is that. Do that in both of these pivoting pockets like so. Flip to the front side, and then just do a schmear. Just do a light little coating like that on both of these, because that's where your throw bearing is gonna ride, like that. We're gonna put a little more than a schmear on this guy. And you can even, so the other place I kind of forgot to show is right in here. I don't know if you can see that. You can see where the paint's been worn away. It's because the sides of this throw bearing actually ride in here. So you can just give it a little coating, not like, so it's just like a thin smear of it. You don't really need a large amount in there. So obviously you don't want so much grease that it starts flying everywhere, and then you get it in the clutch, and then your clutch is gonna feel like crap and not engage, and then you're gonna have to pull your transmission again. So we're gonna put that in there, kind of work it around, and you're gonna see that the grease is transferred over to both those sides. So that's how it goes like that. And I'll show you how it all goes back in the transmission. It doesn't matter which orientation you put it in, just make sure that this side with the two lobes is up if you're looking down on the transmission, or out towards where the motor would be. So the first thing is you gotta bring it down here, and you gotta pull the spring up out of the way and get it up over that ball. So then the spring will look like that, and on this side it just floats like that. So now it's gonna be moving around all over the place. Well, I've already wiped down this shaft here, so all I'm gonna do now is apply a really thin smear of grease, and I probably have enough right here to just put it like that. That's all I need. And then I'm gonna drop it in like this. And now when the clutch moves in and out, it moves like so. And then we're gonna wipe that down and throw it on. All right, so I wanted to clean that up a little bit more. And I do want to put a little bit more grease on here, but one thing I was going to say is this surface here that hits these fingers on the clutch, you do want to make sure that it doesn't have a bunch of shit on it. So I just wipe it down with a microfiber and some brake clean, and then we'll get it wrapped. All right, so like I said, I just used some high temp wheel bearing grease on this stuff. I know there's other greases you can use. There's a grease actually made for this that you can get. People can say that this isn't proper, it's not gonna work. Well, I've had like 14 different cars that I've done transmissions in using this every time, and it works every time. So you can come at me in the comments if you want. But yeah, so some people use white lithium. Some people use the same thing I'm using. Some people put it in dry. That's probably the worst thing you can do. But really, if you just put in any type of grease with a small amount, so it's not gonna sling everywhere, Like I said, high heat temp's probably the best you could do. Now I'm cleaning down the face of that throw bearing, and now we're gonna put a little bit of grease on this input shaft so it helps it slide in those teeth, but that's it. Into this input shaft that goes into the pilot bearing, just help it slip in a little bit more, and we're just gonna put a little. All right, I leaked a little bit of gear oil because I had it standing straight up, but yeah, basically you just throw it on like that, we'll throw the bolts in it, and the two are mated together. Ooh, my fucking concrete. Ew. Gear oil, the worst smelling thing on the planet. All right, so our bell housing bolts look a little rough. These you can reuse. I know in later models like E90s, F30s, all those guys, they all run aluminum bell housing bolts, which you shouldn't reuse because they stretch, and if you put them back in, from personal experience, I've found out that they snap, and sometimes they'll snap from literally just vibration once they're torqued, even if they're torqued to spec. So these guys we're gonna reuse because they're steel bolts. So we're gonna go ahead and just clean them up and then throw them all back in with some blue Loctite, torque them all to spec, and we'll be done. All right, so as you can see, all this weathered old wiring in the engine bay of the M3, it's just, I mean, this car's older than me. It's got at least 7 years on me. So from the factory, they literally just use like electrical tape, and it all just starts to crumble off. And this is the engine bay harness that comes out of the fuse box and goes all the way around the engine bay back to this corner. Well, I've already started to get in here and recover all these, which is a very time-consuming process. So I've already done that much of it. I got to there and I ran out, so now I gotta do this side. These are like all the headlight wires. Same on this side, driver passenger. So gotta finish up doing some stuff there. Other than that, there's just a little bit of cleanup in this engine bay to do. And then we can drop this motor back in.